The U.S. Federal Reserve is heading towards a new policy direction as it awaits a change in leadership. President Trump has nominated Kevin Warsh, a former Fed governor, as Fed chair, raising questions for some about central bank independence, the outlook for interest rates, and the U.S. dollar. At the same time, there has been stress in global bond markets, including recent warning signs out of Japan that is adding to investor unease. Joining us now with his perspective is Scott Colbourne, Managing Director and Head of Active Fixed Income at TD Asset Management. You know, what I could have done when I started this interview was just list all the things that are happening in the world, and I think that would take the 18 minutes that we have together. We wouldn't get a chance to talk. I mean, it's hard. There's a lot happening.
So much happening.
Let's start with the Fed. So what would a Warsh Fed look like, in your opinion? And how different would it be than what markets maybe have used to? What are markets expecting?
Yeah, I mean, to start off, he's a bit traditional. You know, it's a traditional pick in the sense you mentioned he was a governor from 2006 to 2011. He was nominated at 35, so he was the youngest in Fed history. So credentials there. He was one of three considered for the job when Powell got it in Trump 1.0. And he was viewed as an inflation hawk. So, you know, you could sort of say he's a traditionalist in that respect. But I think what we're seeing is differences emerge, and we'll start, you know, with he wants lower short-term interest rates. He's been out there campaigning for lower interest rates, when you could argue that inflation is a bit sticky, so that sets him up for a little bit of a conflict.
And is he saying why is that? Because of AI?
Yeah, it's all AI. He's very much on this, you know, the productivity side of things that is going to keep inflation in check, and so, you know, that is a contrast because there's mixed evidence so far on whether that is the case
benefits
or
being
not.
Seen yet.
Yeah, especially on inflation. So that's a big one. Balance sheet is the one that keeps coming up all the time now, and he resigned in 2011, and he had some disagreements on QE and the balance sheet and the size of it, the footprint of the Fed, if you will, and so that, you know, is another contrast with his, you know, the current governor's.
Can I guess that, does that mean that's a tool he does not want the Fed to use?
He would prefer a smaller balance sheet, less power. Less power, and, you know, that, in his opinion, would give him more freedom to lower short-term interest rates. In some view, it's a bit of a Main Street versus Wall Street thing. Less influenced by the Fed in terms of quantitative easing, which has, in many people's view, you know, influenced and benefited Wall Street more than Main Street, right? So focus on short-term interest rates, where a lot of Main Street is tied to, as opposed to worrying about the you know, the longer end of the market. So that is
Main Street sees their mortgage; they don't see the QE. So.
Exactly, and you know, the other thing about a footprint is regulation. He would like Fed to dial back some of the regulation, so step away from that role. Which, you know, is a positive for a lot of the financial institutions. So those are definitely different things. I think the big thing that really I'm looking towards is this notion of a new accord between the Treasury Department and the Fed. So in 1951, just after the Second World War, the Fed and the government established this accord, which gave the Fed the independence. Right, during the war, the Fed was not independent. It pegged interest rates, and that was part of the war effort. So after the war, we had an accord, and now, you know, Kevin Warsh wants to review that. And when you tie that into the sort of comfort that Trump has with Warsh, because he's part of his political orbit. Kevin Warsh's father-in-law is the largest donor to Trump. He worked for, he worked with Stan Druckenmiller, who Scott Bessent also worked for. So he knows Scott Bessent. So there's this comfort between the administration, the Treasury Department, and the Fed. And I think that with a potential new accord, you know, this speaks to real differences going forward. So traditionalists out of the gate, but we're going to go in a different direction. And the timing and sequence of all this type of stuff is to be determined, but it's definitely in the back of, you know, long-term investors' minds and how to allocate capital.
It's interesting, and these are my words, not yours, and you tell me if I'm right, but when I hear what you're saying is like there's a power shift. It sounds as though he is trying to step back and put the Fed almost in its place and give the government, which is elected every 4 years, less predictable, all those things, and the fiscal side a bit more power, or a lot more power.
Yeah, and the words that, the phrases that have popped up lately is, moving from monetary dominance to fiscal dominance, right? Fiscal is everywhere. We see everybody spending.
From non-elected to elected power, almost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the bond market and the yield curve? We saw the gold reaction when he came in. That's quite the greeting for someone when they're brought in. But what do you expect to have happen from here? What are you seeing in the markets?
I would think that the core reaction is going to be continued expectation of a steeper yield curve. And let's just focus on the two things. He wants to lower short-term interest rates, Fed funds, so that's short-term interest rates go down, and the curve, the longer end of the curve, if there is a smaller balance sheet, however it's achieved, tends to, will lead to a drifting up in the longer-term rates. And so that, trend, I think, is going to, it's been played out as the Fed has cut interest rates. We've seen a bit of a pause, a consolidation, but I think that trend will continue with these two impulses of lower short-term interest rates and less support for longer-term interest rates.
Can I ask you, one of the questions people ask is about the independence of the Fed, but given what you've already said, it sounds like there's a shifting mandate. Like, is it a loss of independence, or is it change in mandate, or I guess does it depend half empty, half full, what you're looking at? So,
let's be honest, the concept of independence is a bit malleable, right? Historically, I think what we're seeing now was done behind closed doors, right? We're
seeing the quiet things out loud now.
Yeah, that's Trump's MO, right? He's in everybody's face and he's saying what he wants, and I think that is the obvious case. That being said, it is clear, and Prime Minister Carney has addressed this, in Davos, we are moving away from this rules-based, post-World War II, environment, and in that, there is less independence for the central bank. It's clear that is being chipped away, and with a new accord, possibly, we should be concerned about it and how we allocate capital.
How does this net out for the U.S. dollar? You get the classic push me, pull me. It is weaker for the U.S. dollar. I think Trump and the administration want a weaker U.S. dollar. But you get Scott Bessent coming out from time to time saying, we have a strong dollar policy, stopping the runaway train that was earlier last week in the U.S. dollar. Net, when I talk about people allocating capital, the U.S. is very dependent on foreign capital. But it is also one of the most dynamic markets out there, particularly the equity market. On the bond market side, people are going to be reassessing their hedge ratios. That is, how much they're hedging the U.S. dollar. Is it a fire sale in terms of treasuries or stuff like that? No. But yes, we have to be worried about this change in the rules-based order, confiscation, all this type of stuff longer term. So these are all genuine concerns at the margin. It continues to erode the U.S. dollar. I wanted to talk to you about the Japanese bond market. And maybe, there's a lot of attention being paid to what's happening. There's some big moves happening, but maybe you could tell us what the move is and then why it functions the way that it does, because I don't think it's common knowledge for a lot of people.
The Japanese bond market, for the longest time, the Japanese central bank pegged rates close to zero, right? So everything was artificially suppressed. They were, the government was huge participants in the bond market. The central bank was in the ETF market. And like a lot of other markets globally, we've seen the shift up in higher interest rates post-COVID, right? 2021, 22, we started the shift up. So in that sense, it's very much the same as everybody else. But, it's a market that, in particular this year, has seen a real shift up in long-term interest rates, right? And so we're talking about 30-year and 40-year interest rates in Japan. And we're dealing with a heavy debt load in Japan. We have a currency that continues to weaken. And so there is real concern about this sort of fiscal debt load and the sustainability of that as interest rates have sort of climbed and climbed and climbed. Now we have an election coming up shortly, a snap call on the election side. So there's this, we've had these episodes of sort of bond market vigilantes, the concern about, we saw that in the UK
Yep.
Under Liz Truss. So, is this another fiscal mess in the making in the Japanese bond market? And that is something that everybody is focused on intently right now. And we've seen some stability, but the trend is still to high levels. And so what does that mean for the rest of the world? Well, this is just an added pressure on other global bond markets, particularly longer term interest rates. And I talked earlier about the pressure given the fiscal dynamic. It's not just Japan now, which is probably the worst offender, but other countries out there. The debt loads are going up and up and up, and fiscal pressures on the long end will weigh across all countries, Canada included. So that is something to be really mindful of as a bond investor.
Yeah. What can I ask you? So somebody's watching and they're a Canadian bond investor. What do I take from all of this?
I think, when I step back, what is positive, what's going on right now that's positive? Global growth is expanding. That is a positive. It's expanding across the globe. We're seeing it in Asia, the US, Canada, Europe. That is a real positive. And combined with the fact that we're seeing pressure on the US dollar, so global currencies are appreciating, the impetus to invest globally and diversifying as a Canadian investor is very positive. So, risk assets benefit in an environment of good global growth, good nominal growth. We're seeing, yes, inflation's a little sticky, but real growth and nominal growth is still good. So there's a positive story for Canadian investors. As far as the bond market goes, well, in Canada, there's not likely to be a huge amount of movement. A little bit of drift up in longer term rates. The Bank of Canada doesn't want to raise rates. But neither at the moment does it want to cut rates.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to benefit. The currency is going to benefit with the U.S. dollar weakness. Volatility. Well, we're going to see that with the trade talks as Kuzma comes closer and closer, and who knows what Trump will say. But so that it's not going to be an easy ride. But I would say that there's positive trends out there. No impetus for substantially lower interest rates, but not a steady. There's a steady positive backdrop for global growth right now.
And I've only about 40 seconds, but I was going to say, when you think about the universe of bonds and what Canadian investors can choose from, what is more interesting right now?
We liked corporate bonds last year. We like corporate bonds this year. Nominal growth. The nominal growth drives equities. Nominal growth drives corporate bonds. So yes, spreads are tight, but nominal all-in yields still good.
Yeah.
So broad support for credit is there. Yes, there's more supply coming this year. Yes, there's AI disruption and more issuance from tech companies, but it's in a positive way, right? There'll be opportunities to invest in a variety of sectors and at higher yields.